Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric. I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys today, and one that everyone has been asking me about. Because a lot of times on the channel, I talk about different software emulation updates for different popular platforms, and everyone always asks, what is the best emulator for X system? So today I'm going to go through the entirety of the Dreamcast home console library, as well as a couple arcade platforms, telling you what my pick for the best Sega emulator for every single platform is. And trust me, it's going to be a relatively long video with a lot of recommendations, but do be aware, if I don't recommend the emulator that you think is the best, it's not because I don't like it. These are my choices, and I know they're going to deliver good results whatever platform you want to play. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. Well, we're going to kick it out with my favorite Sega console of all time, and that is obviously the Sega Dreamcast. And just so you know, I'm also going to be including NAOMI and NAOMI 2 into the mix here, because those are Dreamcast derivative hardware arcade platforms. If you're looking for a video on what the best Sega emulator is for arcade games outside of this, just use MAME, you'll be totally fine. But Dreamcast obviously is just that console that everyone is familiar with if they're a Sega fan. And even though buying a Dreamcast with an optical disc emulator inside is not the most expensive thing in the world, a lot of people like software emulation for the increased visual performance you can get out of it, bumping up the internal rendering resolution or anything else like that. And there are a decent amount of options when it comes to Dreamcast emulation. We have Demule, that is maybe one of the older Dreamcast emulators out there. We have Redream, and we also have Flycast. So there are three good options. I would say for the most part, Demule has been actually surpassed by both Redream as well as Flycast when it comes to Dreamcast emulation. And whether you're playing a 3D game or a 2D game, honestly playing Dreamcast via emulation is a really nice treat, because again, you can just make the games look that much better than they ever did before. So Redream is a very good emulator. To get some of the higher end features, you do actually have to pay a little bit of money for this, and you're going to see it's for desktop as well as Android. And these recommendations are just for Windows based PCs. That's what I use for emulation. As far as Flycast is concerned, another awesome option as well that really does get the job done excellently. So as far as my recommendation, and after this I will explain why, Flycast is my de facto emulator for Sega Dreamcast. It is fully featured, it runs all of the games, you get all of the enhancements for the graphics and performance, and you get that with a complete $0 fee. And as far as both NAOMI and NAOMI 2 are concerned, it's going to work with those as well. And that really is the thing. There are a ton of good arcade exclusive on the Sega NAOMI as well as on the NAOMI 2 arcade platforms, and you want to be able to emulate those as well. Because trust me, a Dreamcast with an optical disc emulator is not that expensive, but a Sega NAOMI or NAOMI 2 with a NetBoot system installed is going to be probably in the high 3 to low 4 figure category, especially if you want the NAOMI 2 side of things. And concerning so many games can use motion controls or analog driving controls, playing these via emulation is what I recommend 99 out of 100 people do. When I want to sit down and play some NAOMI or NAOMI 2, more often than not, I will just load up Flycast versus actually taking my hardware out of the closet. And even on the sound front, something like Wild Riders here sounds incredible coming out of Flycast. So go ahead and listen for 35 seconds, and I'll be right back with more. I mean, it doesn't matter what you throw at Flycast, it always does the job, outside of my recommendation that you still keep Demule around if you want to emulate Sega Hikaru games. The emulation is not perfect, but Hikaru, at least in part, is based on the Dreamcast spec, and it's the only emulator out there that will actually work as of right now. Now, there is some progress in MAME, but it isn't going to be to the level of Demule, so if you want to play something like Sega Hikaru games, you have to keep Demule along for the ride. And there are different versions of it. Honestly, some of the older versions actually do Hikaru better than the more modern versions, so you definitely want to keep a bunch of installations around. But as far as Dreamcast, Sega NAOMI, and NAOMI 2 are concerned, Flycast is my de facto go-to if I'm going to use software emulation for those systems, and if I want to play a Hikaru game, I gotta keep Demule around. Redream is great, it is just not my choice for the systems. But let's jump back a generation and move to the Sega Saturn, because we have a lot of options in emulation as well, and for the longest time Sega Saturn emulation was not the most buttoned up thing, but in the last couple of years it's gotten so much better. We have MedDefend, which is a multiple system emulator that does a great job with Sega Saturn. We have Amir, which is a work in progress Sega Saturn emulator that's showing a ton of progress. We have Yawasen Shiro that's also going to give you some visual enhancements, and a couple other emulators as well. And honestly, again, Sega Saturn emulation has definitely improved in the last few years, but but for the longest time, emulating this system just really didn't work that well. But we're at the point in time now where honestly, emulating Saturn pretty much is an easy thing to do so long as you have a decent spec PC. And again, this is going to be one of those systems. It is fun to emulate because the Sega Saturn with an optical disc emulator isn't going to be the most expensive thing in the world, but it's also not going to be completely free. And of course, we have the different flash cards as well that are going to work into the actual card slot on the Sega Saturn, but those don't have 100% compatibility. They're getting much better, but there are still games out there that'll have glitches or won't load on those cards. And there's so much fun to play on Sega Saturn, honestly. If you haven't been exploring the system, it's one of those things you absolutely have to check it out. So as far as the emulation options on offer are concerned, Yaba Sanshiro does a good job at enhancing some of the visuals, but that will definitely have a lot more visual glitches in some games, some freezing, and just overall compatibility issues. So I think that emulator does a good job in some games, and I really do appreciate the developers' work on it. It is not the emulator that I would recommend just sitting down and playing Sega Saturn games with. And again, I can't stress enough, I'm not here to knock anybody's work. Things progress at different rates, and I always get a comment saying, well, you're not being nice to somebody. It's not that. I'm just here to recommend what the best emulator is in my opinion. Now we're taking a look at Wipeout, and this is running on Amir, and honestly I feel like Amir might end up taking the top spot as far as Saturn emulation is concerned in the future. It has a really nice graphical user interface by default, and it really does work well for the games it works on, but if you're looking for maximum compatibility, Amir just isn't there yet because again, it is an active development. By the end of the development, I think it could be the de facto, but in this instance I wouldn't say that you want to sit down and play games on it yet. Let's do a soundtrack sample of how good Amir sounds currently, and I'll be right back with my top pick for Saturn emulation. Amir is sounding great, and honestly I would love to recommend it, and it's not because it's not doing a great job, it's just because it's not done and you can't just use it without thinking about it. So my recommendation for Sega Saturn emulation is still Mednafen. Yes, it's a command line only application, and you want to install a graphical user interface alongside of it to actually make it easy to use. And sure, it's not just a Sega Saturn emulator, but it is the platform of choice when I need to emulate Sega Saturn. Every single game I've thrown at it has just run. I haven't had any freezing issues. Now of course it doesn't come with overall graphical enhancements like something like DuckStation would. Maybe one day it will, or maybe one day Amir will. It's one of those things. If you want to emulate PlayStation 1, DuckStation does so many incredible things. If you want to emulate Sega Saturn, you're kind of getting the original look, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I know some people do love those visual enhancements, so you leave me a comment down below. When you emulate PlayStation 1 and 64 Sega Saturn games, are you looking for enhancements or just an accurate experience? But for my pick for Sega Saturn, you have to go with Mednafen. Now moving over to probably the hardest recommendation in the entirety of this video, we're going to be talking about Sega Genesis and Sega CD and Sega 32X all in one combination, because there are emulators out there that work with basically anything. And just recently Genesis Plus GX was able to actually emulate Paprium, not with a music chip that hasn't really been reverse engineered yet, but it was a new evolution in overall Sega Genesis emulation. And again, the laundry list of different Genesis emulators out there is comprehensive, and this is one where my pick might not be your pick whatsoever. There's more than one I could recommend to say. It'll do absolutely everything, and honestly when it comes to this emulation, I'm actually going to recommend two for very specific use cases. But when it comes to general Sega Genesis and Mega Drive emulation, Genesis Plus GX absolutely gets the job done every single time I use it. And you also have different audio modules, including the nuked implementation, so you can kind of play around with the audio as well. Genesis Plus GX just works every single time I use it. It is flawless. There really isn't any latency that's going to affect your gameplay when you're actually enjoying the games. Everything is just going to be 100% of the time as far as I can tell. And again, it's not just Sega Genesis that we're talking about, we're also talking about the Sega CD and 32X and even combinations of those within, because Doom Resurrection is going to be a very interesting example of why I would actually say you might want more than one Sega Genesis emulator installed on your system at any given point in time. But even with the Sega CD, I would say Genesis Plus GX just always works for me, so long as you have the right BIOS files in in there. And if you need any of the tutorials to get these running on your PC, check my Emulation Night School playlist. You'll see all of the different tutorials for all of the different diverse emulators that I'm talking about in this video, and those guides are all up to date and current because I did check them before I actually did this voiceover. But there's one instance in which I would recommend a different emulator other than Genesis plus GX. And that is the few games that are going to utilize the Sega Genesis, the Sega CD, as well as the 32X in conjunction, creating that ultimate tower of power. This is Doom 32X Fusion, and this is utilizing the Genesis, the 32X, as well as the Sega CD all at the same time to be able to play a game that is way bigger and way more impressive than anything that came out in the retail library back in the day. And this is something that even Mr. FPJ cannot handle. You can't run a Sega CD, a 32X, and a Genesis all at the same time. And for ease of use, this just works flawlessly in the Ares multiple system emulator. Normally that's what I recommend for N64, but if you want to play all three of Sega 16-bit pieces of hardware along with the 32X, which is technically 32-bit, this is your go-to, and it sounds incredible as well. Go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back with a bit more. Ares is going to be able to run Doom Fusion with the 32X with Sega CD as well as the Sega Genesis in conjunction, and it's going to be very easy to do so. And on the Master System and even SG-1000 side of things, Genesis plus GX is going to be my de facto choice as well. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, what are you using for Sega Genesis emulation? I would be curious to hear your feedback on all your favorite emulators, and honestly there are a ton out there to choose from. And if you have one, Mr. FPG will do all of this except Dreamcast and of course the Tower of Power. But those are my recommendations for emulators, the best ones on the market for all of the different diverse Sega consoles out there. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And one more time, remember, if I didn't recommend your favorite emulator, it's not because I hate it, I just chose something different. But short of that, we're done. Go emulate some games, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.